Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Amar Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's video, we're going through the final position deep dive analysis in SuperCoach, the fullbacks, a very important high upside scoring position, so we're definitely going to dissect as much as we can to make sure we're picking the two best fullbacks for our round one teams. So if you do enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing as well to the channel if you haven't already. Let's get straight into it. So as you can see on the slide, lots and lots of blue shaded cells on this table here, which really shows how high scoring and important the fullback position is for SuperCoach. So you can see for 2023, we had 6 players in the top 20 averaging players, and a lot of them in the top half as well. Ponga, Drinkwater, Tavovic, and Reece Walsh all have 80 plus averages. We had 5 in 2022, 3 with an 80 plus average, and we had 5 as well in 2021, 3 of them as well with an 80 plus average. So you will see that in the video. I don't really talk about many cheapies. There's one, Keanu Kinney from the Gold Coast Titans, who may be there for the first 4 rounds. To be honest, I don't really think this is a position where you really go cheapy. It was a bit of an exception last year with Jareen Buller, where it was at a time where he was viable and there wasn't a lot of other fullbacks, and he ended up just absolutely killing it and making about 500k within about a month. So there's a little bit of an exception with him. We don't have that this season really from the start. So this is a position I think spend big and get the big guns, because this is the high scoring position in SuperCoach. I think 25% of the top 20 averaging players of the last 3 seasons have been fullbacks. So we need to spend our money right here, and definitely is a position where you can use your trades to hop around and try to target good matchups and good draws as well, which we will get into in this video as well, but don't understate how important this position is for SuperCoach. So I mentioned this try scoring map and went into it into quite a bit of detail in the centering video. If you haven't watched that one already, do check it out. So I won't spend as much time talking about this, because it doesn't really matter as much with fullbacks who can tend to drift to both sides of the field. And the thing is, a lot of the fullbacks on this list who are the gun players and very central to their team's success, they create a lot of these stats themselves. Like if we look at someone like the Newcastle Knights, for example, 43% of tries scored and down the left edge. That's Ponga. That's his favourite side. He's the one creating those tries. Say we look at the North Queensland Cowboys, 40% of tries scored on the right-hand side for them last year. If you briefly watch the trials highlights between the Cowboys and Raiders on the weekend, you would have seen Drinkwater get a few try assists on that right-hand side. So again, he's the one creating that, because he is the fullback who overlaps and creates those kind of extra man advantages. So the try scoring map doesn't really mean a lot, I think, for fullbacks who can tend to drift on either side of the field, but it's more that they actually create this, again, showing how important they are for their team, but also for SuperCoach point scoring. So talking about the gun fullbacks, I will apologize for how much is happening on the screen here, so I'll try to talk about everything just so it's very clear. So you can see kind of this side here, you can see a few questions that are pulled off Twitter. Ponga and Turbo, are they set and forget for round 1? Pick 2 out of Turbo, Ponga, and Drinkwater. Latrell and Papenhuyzen, thoughts as the only 2 goal kickers, as they are on the decline, but does that make the case for Latrell and also for Ponga as well? So those are a few questions for discussion points on this slide as well. I've got all of the major gun fullbacks from last season, got their price tag, got their averages. I've also done some number crunching, as of course I always do. I've broken down their averages over last season based on against easy opposition and then also against hard opposition, and that's based on the actual SuperCoach points conceded to fullbacks. Number of 100 plus games, I bumped it up to 100 for the fullbacks, because 90 just meant the stats were just generally always very high, so I've tried to add an extra layer of difficulty, making it 100 plus. Percentage of games that they scored over 100, ownership, that's all in the top half. Below me, we've got the standard kind of average breakdown based on base, evasive, creative, and scoring. Then we've got the draw for every team as well. You can see kind of from the questions and also from the ownership stats, there are really kind of 2 who really stick out for ownership, and that's number 1 is Ponga, and then in terms of the really high priced ones, it's Tom Tavovic. So I think I'll start off with KP. So he is the most highly owned fullback at 33%, 892k as well. He is the most expensive. Like if you've been listening to any kind of SuperCoach content over the season, or over the preseason, I should say, you would know all the stats about Ponga. When he moved to fullback last year and he started goal kicking, he just became an absolutely elite option for SuperCoach. So he's priced at that 87.4 average. He did actually have a game where he was injured. So if you take away that non-injured game, his average actually increases to 92.5. So we're already looking at a 5-point bump in value purely just on him being healthy and no injury affected games. If you then look at when his average, when he was at number 1, 105.3. I haven't even crunched it for when he was goal kicking. It doesn't matter. 105 is potentially almost 20 points of value purely just in KP playing at fullback. And the difference was very stark because I looked at his averages last season playing at 5'8", and it was a 62 average. So the difference was night and day, basically. And against easy opposition, he absolutely tore it up. He had an average of 96.9. And pleasingly, against even tough opposition, he averaged 84.5. So the opposition didn't really tend to matter when he was playing so well, obviously in Dally M form, still able to average 85 against the tougher opposition. But the thing with KP as well is that he doesn't really have actually that many tough opponents over the first 10 rounds. So if you look further below, you can see I've done some color shading for rounds 1 to 5, 6 to 10, and then all. So that's actually doing a count of, I looked at the difficulty of opponents in terms of the PPM that they conceded to opposition fullbacks last season. Long story short, lower number, the better. And KP has ranked the best draw from rounds 1 to 5, best draw rounds 6 to 10, and then obviously the best draw for the first 10 weeks. So from a draw point of view, he stands out as the best. Highest average from last season as well. Is goal kicking one of the few to be goal kicking here as well. I just can't really think of too many reasons to not start with him. I know he's very, very expensive, but look, he's the most highest owned, and he's one of those players who I think if you don't have him from the beginning of the season, like he could be a very easy captain option in round 1 at home to the Raiders. You won't win SuperCoach in the first month, but you could lose it if, in the first 4 weeks you don't own KP, and he comes out and averages kind of 95 points over the first month. And by round 5, the thing is you would really want him. I think by round 5 when he's got Dragons, Bulldogs, Dolphins, and West Tigers, and that next 5 from rounds 5 to 10. So the way I look at it as, yes, he's very expensive. Yes, the first 4 rounds don't look the easiest on paper, but you are probably saving yourself an inevitable trade by wanting to have him, I think, by round 5. And at that point, maybe he's gone up in price. We just don't know. And you may have other things in your team that you want to do. It's not easy to structure around buying an 890k player. So I find it's easiest just to start with him. And I think set and forget. And you can own him over the first 10 weeks. It doesn't have a buy in that period, which is very helpful as well. And I just think you're going to want to captain him a lot, probably rounds 5 to 10. So Ponga for me was a shoe-in, and I don't think I'll be looking to go off him. So for one of those questions, which was pick 2 out of Turbo, Ponga, and Drinky, all of those stats, the really, really good draw for me makes Ponga number 1. So we have to choose another one out of Turbo and Drinkwater. So I'll compare kind of Drinkwater and Turbo around at the same time because I think they really tie into each other. So I think Drinkwater versus Turbo. So Drinkwater, obviously a little bit more expensive, about 20k more expensive. One thing with Drinkwater, I think from the stats from last year, obviously really, really strong, 83.4 average. He actually had that game where he got sent off very early last season. I think it was in round 2. If you exclude that game where he only literally got 1 point, his season-long average was 87.6. So he actually would have averaged more than KP. Obviously, KP had his own injury-affected game, but we're looking at Drinkwater with an average of about 87 if you exclude that one game where he did get a send-off. The other thing with Drinkwater is that typically he's not known for his kind of work rate and his base stats. So he had a base average of 25, which look, it is less than Turbo, who's gotten a base average of 28. I'm sure that Turbo's also got a higher base plus power than Drinky. And so the argument against Drinkwater was always that he's not consistent, he's got a low floor, good ceiling, but he can drop those really low scores in there for you. Now, granted, he did have a low score last season of 29, which he got against Penrith, but that was Penrith in Penrith, probably the toughest matchup that you can have. Apart from that, his next lowest score was 44 against the Sharks. Again, not an easy opponent. So I would kind of look at it as, look, Penrith will give everyone a low score, like Turbo got 26 against Penrith as well. So a low score really of like 45, 50 is pretty good for a fullback who is generally reliant on attacking stats. His average last season against easy opponents was also really strong, 92.3, and against the tough opposition, 77.3 as well, which is really, really good, especially considering we're looking at someone who has maybe traditionally got a lower floor. The one thing I will say about Drinkwater with the numbers that I think probably helped him last year, a lot of his games against tough opponents, it kind of happened during the Origin period. So I'm looking at it here. He versed Melbourne in round 14, the round directly after State of Origin. He played Penrith in round 16, again soon after Origin, and then he played the Rabbitohs in round 17. So he did benefit, I think, from playing some of these tougher opposition in that Origin period. So I do think that 77 average against tough opposition is a little inflated, because if you look at his games against tough opponents outside of that Origin period, we're looking at 44 against Sharks, 54 against the Roosters, 85 against the Sharks again later in the season is pretty good, 67 Broncos, and then of course that 29. So it's not quite a 77 average. We're probably looking at more like a high 60s. That is the one thing I would consider with him if you are considering him. But he is a pod, 6% owned. The thing that I do like about him is his overall draw, I think, is really, really strong. So rounds 1 to 5, he's actually got, in the stats view, the third ranked best draw behind KP and Gutherson, which is directly different to Turbo, who's, I don't know what the specific ranking is, but much worse, because Turbo's got that Vegas game as well in round 1, where, it looks as though the field's going to be a bit smaller. It probably, in my opinion, would be more suited to defense if it's a smaller field. So attack is also generally less there in the opening round. So I'm looking at games for Manly against Rabbitohs, Roosters, Parramatta, and the Dragons. I mean, the Dragons matchup in round 4 could be good, before Penrith in round 5. I'm kind of thinking there could be a good case for fullback roulette here. Have Drinkwater from rounds 1 to 5, and then if Turbo comes out guns blazing, round 7, maybe you then move Drinkwater onto Turbo before Drinkwater plays the Penrith Panthers, and you can target Turbo from round 7 to Origin, basically, where he's got Titans, Parramatta, Raiders, and Dolphins. So I've always generally been in preseason on the Ponga Turbo combination, and Turbo just kind of feels like a safety net of, historically this is a guy who's proven it time and time again. He's a quality gun option for SuperCoach. And the other thing with Turbo I should mention is his average against a tough opposition from last season wasn't very good. It was a 52.8. Granted, obviously, what I mentioned with Drinkwater, if you bring that down a little bit, I'd probably say, Turbo had a better average against the easy opponents, but those easy opponents probably not really coming until about round 7. Whereas with Drinkwater, Dolphins straight away in round 1, Dragons in round 3. Granted, it's an away game, so it could be a little bit tougher. I'd say on paper the matchups are better for Drinkwater. I probably think Turbo's got the better floor to him. He's a safer option with a base of 28. And similar upside, not too different. Like with Ponga, I didn't mention it, but 35% of the time last season he was scoring over 100. It's 33% for Drinkwater and 36% for Turbo. Granted, Turbo did have a smaller sample size. So for me, it kind of comes down to, I think, risk appetite. Are you willing to go a little bit more pod with a Drinkwater, taking the thing that he is a little bit more reliant on attacking stats? Like on the weekend, he got 3 try assists and he scored about 66 points for SuperCoach. Now we know he can get those try assists. He's definitely geared towards that. We haven't seen Turbo in the preseason, so you're trusting on a fit and firing Turbo from round 1, and he is also going to be playing in Vegas, and I think you need to be weighing up these couple of things. I've been on Turbo Ponga the whole preseason. I'm slowly leaning towards maybe taking a little bit of a bet on someone like a Drinkwater, at least with the knowledge that he's more expensive. And if Turbo comes out and absolutely kills it and proves me wrong, I guess I could always move down from Drinky to Turbo. But I think for me, if you're someone who's not fully willing to take the risks from early stage and you want to kind of go along with the pack, the two that I would pick would be Ponga and Turbo. I think for more safety, Turbo's a little bit more owned, slightly higher floor, and probably has more of a track record from a SuperCoach point of view. Whereas with Drinkwater, I think what you're seeing is a really improving player over time. Like his average has consistently been going up over the last 3 to 4 seasons. We saw again a glimpse of his, of his quality, I guess, in the trials matchup as well. A little bit more risk with him, I guess, in that he's got a lower floor, and I do think some of his averages from last year is slightly inflated due to being able to take advantage of tougher opposition when they were in their weaker periods during Origin. So that's kind of how I feel about those two. If you had to ask me, gun to my head, what would I do if the lockout was happening in 2 minutes? I would probably go Ponga and Turbo. That's more from a safety point of view, but I think if I've got time to mull it over, I may be willing to take a risk on starting with a Drinkwater with a look to maybe switch around to him to Turbo, maybe in say round 6 or round 7, or maybe even down to a Papenhuyzen as well. So that's kind of where I stand with those two, I guess, in terms of my pick out of those two. Next up, I got Reece Walsh. So Reece Walsh, I haven't really been considering for round 1. A lot of that is just, I think, due to the draw for the Broncos. So you can see here, I've got 79.6 average for him, really good against easy opposition, 89.3 it was last season, but whenever he versed the tough opposition, it was 58.7. So he does tend to be a little bit more reliant on attacking stats. You can see that below me, a base stat average of 20. Him and Latrell kind of are the same there for that base stat average. So with Walsh, you are relying a little bit more on those attacking stats and the creative stats. You can see that he averaged 32 last season compared to someone like a Turbo, who only averaged 22. Broncos matchups as well, obviously round 1 being in Vegas, another con potentially if you're thinking smaller field, less ability to get attacking stats. And then I really just don't like their draw until round 6. At that point, maybe round 6 is a good switch as well from Drinkwater to Reece Walsh. But at least for the opening period, like Walsh showed what he can do in the trials last week, but it was against a weakened Cowboys outfit. And I think come the start of the season, we saw it last year as well. Like Walsh started really strong, but the Broncos had a really, really good start to the season. And when the draw toughened up a little bit, the scores did regress. So he just feels like a guy that I think you just need to be targeting when the draw is right. And I just don't think it is that case at the beginning of the season. So he's personally not for me, but no doubting the actual quality of the player. Gutherson is a little bit strange because I think if you look purely at the draw, he comes out really, really good. He has the second best draw from rounds 1 to 5. He's around third or fourth between round 6 to 10. So overall, over the first 10 weeks, he's actually got the second best draw for a fullback after KP. The thing with Gutherson, though, is that I think he benefited a lot last year when Dillbags wasn't in the team because he was able to take a greater mantle of more attacking stats, more responsibility. And he also scored a lot of tries last season. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it seemed to be his best try scoring year. And when I look at him, his average last season against easy opposition, 87.9, against tougher opposition, 65.2. Which is kind of what you feel with Gutherson. Like he's got a high work rate, base average of 28. He's always going to take plenty of runs, but ceiling wise just never feels quite like it. Granted, he did have 6 scores over 100 last season, but if you look at that as a percentage of the total number of games he played, we're looking at 26%, and you can already see that small drop off from the first 4, who all were in the kind of 30% range, whereas with Gutherson, we're looking at 26%. So ceiling wise, he just doesn't as consistently hit it as much as some of these other guys. The draw is good. So I guess the question is, let's say if you're not starting with someone like Dillbags, but maybe you do want to capitalize on the good draw for Parramatta, maybe you then go Gutherson. But he just feels like he's going to be hovering within a tighter band of scores between 65 to 90, which is definitely not bad by any means. But I think if you're paying a lot of money for your fullback, you probably want to get these guys that you want to bring in a captain. We talk about Ponga's ceiling, like it's clearly evident. Turbo, like I know last year we saw a few glimpses of it as well, but God, I think back to 2021 as well, we were just scoring hundreds and 150s for fun. Even Drinkwater had scores last season, scoring like 170, whereas with Gutherson, his high score last season was 138, followed by 132. So there was a really good period for him last season when Dillbags wasn't in the team. But when he versed a tough opposition, yes, the numbers did go down. So I think draw-wise for Gutherson looks really good, so I don't mind him as a bit of a pod. He's very, very low owned in comparison. I had 2% at the time that I pulled these numbers. So I think if you're a massive Eels fan and you want to trust Gutherson, or you really go by the draw and those kind of numbers, then I think Gutherson is potentially a good pod for you in fullback. I guess the only con is that generally in the beginning of the year, the number of attacking stats does reduce, or not reduce, but I should say it's lower compared to later in the season. So the draw isn't as much of an impact, I guess, for beginning of the year. So if you look at that combined with him not generally having as much upside, he's personally probably not for me. I think there are enough good options elsewhere. I've got Dillbags already in my team to capitalize on this good draw as well, and he's generally got a pretty good floor too. So Gutherson personally isn't for me. Someone who is pretty matchup proof is Latrell. So there was a couple of questions about Latrell. He is one of the few goal kicking fullbacks here, which is definitely useful. Like if you look at the numbers below me, in terms of an average derived from scoring, he's the best out of all of these fullbacks. Just ignore Pappy for a second because I put those numbers in for a bit of fun looking at over the last 3 seasons. But realistically, from 2023, Latrell had the best scoring average out of all of these fullbacks with 21, and that is because he's a goal kicker. So that means he's generally a little bit more safer from a scoring point of view. Like if you look at his numbers, 80.6 average against easy opposition last year, 74 against tough opposition. So the draw doesn't really seem to matter too much for Latrell. Like if you look at that draw for the Raiders, for the Rabbitohs, pretty tough all the way up until round 7, and then even after that, looking at Melbourne and Penrith, and the draw difficulty ratings I've also got there show that. Like if you look at the first 10 weeks, behind the Storm, he's actually got the worst draw for a fullback, that is. But with Latrell, it always feels a little bit different because we just know how good of a player he is. Goal kicking, obviously, as I mentioned, really useful. There's a good discount as well to some of these other options. Like between him and Turbo, you're looking at about a 50k saving, which is definitely not small. And Latrell, we know, is a quality option. In 2022, I think he averaged like 84. The only reason I haven't started with Latrell currently in my squad is one, he is a little bit cheaper. So if I feel like I ever need to move off him, I need to be finding money elsewhere in my team. And at the moment, I'm finding it difficult to create money. So I feel like if I ever wanted to move off Latrell, I think that could be a little bit difficult at the beginning of the year. And the draw. I know that the draw doesn't seem to bother him that much, but when I look at Ponga and I look at Drinkwater, who even if you take a discount to his average against tough opposition, maybe you dock it by like 5 points. It's not that much different to Latrell, but then I look at the average against the easy opposition and I feel like potentially there's just a bit more upside in Drinkwater to begin the year, or maybe even a Turbo as well. I do generally prefer Turbo's good floor, and we know Turbo has that ability to smash out hundreds very easily as well. So Latrell, personally for me, I haven't started with, because I also look at it as, apart from round 4 against the Bulldogs, I'm not sure if I'd ever really be captaining him, and he is close to 800k, whereas with Ponga, Drinkwater, like I can see some matchups in there that I'd be very happy to chuck a vice captaincy or captaincy on them as well. Last season, also only 19% of the time did he score over 100, so the numbers kind of show that a very tight band between his best against easy and also then tough opposition. So I don't know, it's tough with Latrell because last year probably wasn't his best year, and we've seen in seasons prior he can go on an absolute tear, but for me, I think I want to see it first, especially probably from the Rabbitohs. I know they're a little bit disappointed to the back end of the year, and I think his form will be directly linked to how good they go. So I'm going to take the approach of just wait and see with Latrell. Teddy, as crazy as it sounds, I haven't really considered him at all for round 1, and we're talking about one of the best Supercoach guns we've ever had in the game. The thing with Teddy is that his work rate didn't really drop off last season, and I should mention as well in the chart below me, some of the asterisks that I've given next to the players is like adjusted scores, accounting for any kind of injuries or send-offs and things like that, just to try to put everyone on an even playing field. So Teddy, you can see, had a base average of 29, so there was no shortage or no slowing down of the work rate. Like, we know Teddy is a busy player, takes lots of runs, lots of tackle busts. The problem was that I think he just took too many of them last season, and it hurt his ability to actually get those bigger attacking stats like the try assists. Finally, on Papenhuyzen. So obviously a couple of questions about Papenhuyzen. So far in the trials, he hasn't been goal kicking, and for me, that kind of immediately puts a red line through him. He's obviously coming back through major injuries. Melbourne have got a very tough start as well for the first 5 rounds, and look, I know the stats that I've put there make Papenhuyzen look like an absolute gun, which he is. And if he ever gets back to full fitness and goal kicking, it'll be very hard to not own Pappy in my team. Because when I look back over the last 3 seasons, at any time he was playing 80 minutes at fullback, goal kicking, just healthy and absolutely killing it, the guy was averaging 100 points, 117 against easy opponents, 81 against tough ones, and 50% of the time he was scoring over 100. Like, the numbers were just mad. Unfortunately, with the draw and coming back from those injuries, not goal kicking, we're not going to be getting those kind of numbers. The price tag is good, don't get me wrong, like 646k, so I think he's priced at about a 60 something average, so I'd probably say he's definitely at value, potentially undervalued as well, but it's a tough one because the whole balancing act of Supercoach is 1, value, getting cash, 2, points. And we saw before, I keep talking about it with fullbacks, points I think is the primary consideration for the position. It's not necessarily value. And so I think the fact that he's not goal kicking automatically for me docks him a little bit more. Even if he was goal kicking, there was a part of me that wasn't maybe going to start with him because the draw was so tough, and I would be happy to see him through those first 5 weeks until round 6 before he versus the Bulldogs. But at the moment, it doesn't look like he's goal kicking. So for me, I'm not really considering him. Happy to spend up a little bit more and sacrifice elsewhere in my team to try get in one of Ponga, Drinky, Turbo, Reece Walsh, Latrell, those kind of guys. Finally, Dream Buller, I've got him because I felt like I needed to include him because he was so good to us last season. But with bye round 1, obviously that makes it very difficult. Just doesn't have the ceiling of these other fullbacks. 11% of the time he was scoring over 100. Had a couple of games last season where he scored over 100. He had like a 95 and was a great cheapie for us, but he's not a cheapie anymore. 583k. I feel like that's what he's going to offer you. Maybe that ticks up to a 60, but I keep saying it. This is a position that you want to be targeting your really big 75, 80 plus averaging guys, and I just don't think Buller fits into that. So he's personally not one for me. So that's kind of my wrap up of the fullbacks. Clear standout and summary is Ponga. I think for me, he's not a must-have, but like I'd be very scared not owning Ponga. So he's definitely number 1 in my eyes. Number 2 then, I think based on what I said, I would probably, is it a cop-out to say 2A Drinky, 2B Turbo? That's probably how I would look at it. But I think if you're more of the pod, aggressive, willing to play a bit more fullback roulette, go Drinky. if you want to start a little bit more safe, don't want to be burning as many trades in your fullback to start off with, I think go turbo. That's kind of how I would split them as my second. Number 3, I think would be Reece Walsh. Despite the tough draw, I think he's still that quality player. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that. I think I would actually go Latrell instead, because I think with Latrell, despite the draw being very tough, he feels a bit more matchup proof, and he is goal kicking. So I'd probably put him just a bit ahead of Reece Walsh. Then I'd probably put Reece Walsh. I put Gutherson after that, which feels a little bit tough considering how good of the draw that Gutherson has, but just more eye test, the kind of consistency of a big score feels a little bit lesser with Gutho. And then the others, to be honest, I'm not really seriously considering them. So that's my kind of ranking of the fullback gun position. There's no real cheapies of note to speak of apart from Keanu Keeney of the Gold Coast Titans, who is going to be playing fullback until Jaden Campbell comes back. But ultimately, I just don't think this is a position to be looking at too many cheapies. And I haven't in this video discussed any kind of fullbacks who you can pick in center wing. So guys like, Ruben Garrick, Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow, etc. Not really considering them in the fullback spot. And another one is CNK. He's fullback only, but he's currently in a doubt. I think he won't be back until about round 4. So another small reason why I haven't included him. So that's kind of the reason why I wanted to focus on these particular players, but hopefully you all enjoyed that deep dive. All right, everyone, that is my summary of the fullback position. Hope you all enjoyed it and found some value out of it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, please. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, all of those good things. Subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you all in the next one.